Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's program. My name is Shardé Alexander. I am the exhibitions intern for the Armory Center for the Arts, and I, along with my colleague James Morris, will be your host for this evening. We want to welcome you to tonight's program, Log Into Emerging Arts Tech, with our guest speakers, Devin Bauer and Peter Wu, where we will be discussing their respective journeys in the arts and technology field and how work such as theirs is shifting the dynamic in how art is perceived. We would like to take the time to thank the Getty Foundation and the Getty Merrill undergraduate internship programs for supporting the Armory summer internships. Getty Merrill undergraduate internships are intended for outstanding students who are members of groups underrepresented in careers related to museums and the visual arts. Here at the Armory, our mission is to build on the power of art to transform lives and communities through creating, teaching, and presenting the arts. Before we move on, the Armory Center for the Arts in Pasadena would like to acknowledge our presence on the traditional and unceded territory of the Tongva peoples. We recognize the Tongva peoples as the traditional caretakers as well as the current and future inhabitants of the land we occupy. And we would like to pay our deepest respect to Tongva elders, both past and present. I am currently broadcasting from Payokacham or Listennial land, and I recognize the Payokacham people as the traditional caretakers of this land. And now I will hand it over to James to introduce our guests for this evening.
Thank you, Shardé. As Shardé said, my name is James Morris, and I am the Communications and Media Intern for the Armory. I'd also like to acknowledge that I am broadcasting from Tongva land as well, and recognize the Tongva people as the traditional caretakers of this land. And now I'll move on to introducing our guests, starting with Peter Wu. Peter Wu generates artworks and immersive environments utilizing animation and rendering software, projection mapping, 3D printing, could we get everybody to make sure that they're muted? So our presenters. Thank you, John. All right. I'll go back to introducing Peter. Peter Wu generates artworks and immersive environments utilizing animation and rendering software, projection mapping, 3D printing, and machine learning. In 2020, he founded and created Epoch, an artist-run virtual experiment that functions as an inclusive community building platform, inviting established and emerging artists working in both digital and analog mediums to participate. Wu's work examines how technology can alter and influence our perceptions of identity, reality, and history. Devin Bauer's career has been dedicated to the collision of art and immersive technology. Devin has worked in the virtual reality and augmented reality industry for over half a decade. Some of her exciting work as an artist in residence in Stanford University's Electrical Engineering Department is on display now at the ongoing exhibition Smell Print at the pop-up A&D Museum in Los Angeles. We'll be having a Q&A after the presentations, so if you have any questions, be sure to drop them in the chat and we'll try our best to get them answered. So without further ado, please welcome Devin Bauer.
Awesome, and I'll just share my screen here with you quickly. Okay, can you guys see my screen okay? First of all, I just want to do a huge thank you to Shardé and James for putting this night together and for inviting me to be here today. I am also calling in from Los Angeles and recognize the Gabrielino and Tongva peoples as the traditional caretakers of this land. So I'm going to be speaking today about multisensory interfaces in art. And we can dive in and unpack a little bit more about what that means. But just as a background, I'm coming to you today as both a PhD student in UCLA's Theater and Performance Studies and an artist in residence at Stanford's Electrical Engineering Department. And my work in kind of both of these realms is really about new media, performance, and the senses. And for me, my research and practice are very bound up in each other. My research definitely informs my practice or my art making and vice versa. And I think you'll see that probably in my presentation today. Okay, so if we think about multisensory interfaces, what does that mean? When we think about multisensory interfaces, we're really thinking about either interfaces that engage multiple senses or typically that go beyond the visual. But of course, to really unpack that, we need to know what are our senses. if you ask most people, I think they will most likely give you a list of sight, sound, touch, taste, and smell. And typically they would probably give it to you in that order in terms of importance. And if I was really going to geek out about it, I would talk about Plato actually originally, like 2000 years ago in Greece, labeled these senses and put them in this order. And we very much kind of kept that order of importance today. And so a lot of the interfaces that we have and a lot of the kind of new media art that we have deals with these first three, right? Sight, of course, is through screens and the visual. Sound, you guys are hearing me, and we have music and we have different like new media art in that way. And then touch too, in some capacity. We have touch screens, we have haptics, we have this kind of keyboards, vibrations when you get a text. So these senses are really engaged, but our other senses are often kind of neglected. And by the other senses, I do mean taste and smell, but I also mean what other senses, right? Are these five really the only senses that we have? Of course, the answer is no. And this list is building all the time. You may know some of the kind of most common ones that are adopted are proprioception, which is the awareness of where your limbs are in space, temperature, of course, pain, balance is actually a sense. And some people consider entrainment, which is this kind of internal rhythm, right? If I would play a metronome for you for a minute or so, eventually your heart would start to get in rhythm with that. So we have this entire body, right? This entire sensing body with all of these different like instruments for measuring the world. And so much of new media really just puts the body on the screen and ignores a lot of that. And so what I'm really interested in is thinking beyond the screen and thinking about how to incorporate the full body into new media art practice. Maybe to give you a little bit more background in where I'm coming from, I can tell you how I came to some of these questions. I was the producer on this project, which is Tree VR. It was directed by Milica Zetz and Winslow Porter. And this was a about 7-minute VR experience, 8-minute VR experience that turned you into a tree. So you started in the ground and you grew to become a rainforest tree. Your arms were literally your branches and your body was a trunk. And you lived through 100 years in the life of a kapok tree until humans came. And sadly, it was not a happy ending for the tree. But this experience like really blew us away because we toured to over 100 festivals around the world, including like the World Economic Forum, Sundance, Tribeca, Cannes. It took us by surprise. And as a really big privilege, I personally got to put thousands of people through a VR headset. And that is cool because this was a lot of people who never experienced VR before, who never or maybe we're new to it in some way. It was a new technology. I got to see how are people responding to that? What was their impulse? And like I said, it was multisensory. So we had wind and smells and vibrations and heat and different things that happen to you. And as I was just going through the motions of putting these people through, I started to realize that there was one sense that if the machine didn't work or we didn't have it with us, people's emotional response was dampened. And I just like kind of held on to that and thought, okay, I'll look into that later. And that was smell. We really had people go through and the sound didn't work. You know, it's new tech, anything can happen. And they didn't notice, but when the smell wasn't there, they were reacting like less emotionally. So that's when I started looking at smell tech at Stanford. Now, before we get into a little bit more about smell tech, I want to have a more analog multisensory moment and ask you to find something around you that you like the smell of. So just grab something nearby. Can be anything. I have this candle. And just breathe it in for a minute. And I just want you to notice, like, how does smelling that feel? What does that smell remind you of? Where does that smell take you? I really do like to take a moment to think about how multisensory things feel. And I encourage you to keep smelling it throughout the chat. And definitely, I'm curious what you're smelling. So type it in and I'll check after when I can see the chat again. But let people know what you're smelling if you can. But you probably did notice that that experience of smelling was different than just sitting there and listening to me. And there's a few reasons for that, right? Memory and emotions are processed in the same part of the brain as scent. So it's directly tied in to both of those kind of parts of our cognitive processing. But it's also often subconscious. So we are not even aware of what we're smelling in many instances, and it's still affecting us. And that was part of what we discovered at Stanford. In our work there, we found that we could completely alter how people experienced any type of VR character that they met just based on the smell that we used. So this was a sense that was highly manipulative, incredibly evocative, but also often overlooked. I think you probably heard of smell-o-vision, or you got like a scratch and sniff card from your teacher, or you saw Shrek 4D or Soaring Over California, or all of these kind of famous like smell vision experiments. But a lot of times they're marked as kind of failures. And I think that that's because it's often a gimmick that's thrown onto something to just match the visual and give, give kind of weight to that visual image. But I'm really interested in how to harness it as its own unique tool for storytelling. And what are the new media devices and storytelling formats that really allow us to push that? So these are the kind of questions that led me to develop Smellprint. And as James mentioned, this is an exhibition that is currently on in Los Angeles for the next week. And Smellprint is being put on by A&D Museum, and it was curated by Leila Waba, and it is also in partnership with Stanford, where I currently have my residency. So in Smellprint, we've taken over an entire storefront in Sunset Boulevard and in Silver Lake. And when you come inside, you'll see this chamber in front of you, this like immersive chamber. And we have participants entering one person at a time, and they have a 10-minute experience alone. And when you walk in, you are in complete darkness. So this is designed, it's an artificial darkness. There is not one pinhole of light, which is something that we don't typically encounter in our daily lives. So you are in complete darkness, and you start to hear a voice bringing you through a story. And the story is, it begins just kind of telling you about smelling and telling you about this concept of a smell print, which is that all scents are taught to us. And the way that that works is the first time you have ever encountered any smell, your brain like stores that moment and is like, okay, now I know what that smell is. And anytime you'll smell it again, your brain will like check back and come back and be like, okay, that's what this smell is. And so then we have like a series of smells that come out in the darkness and lead you through a few smell prints until we get to the end, where we have a scent that has been chemically designed to smell like nothing on earth. And so it is the first time you will smell this, and we make a new smell print together. So that's kind of the experience. And in terms of the multisensory interface that we're working with, we've been very lucky to work with O-Widgets, which is a company in the UK that makes this incredible device that triggers different scents. But what's so difficult when working with smell, it's kind of easy to make a room smell, right? But it's really hard to make it stop smelling when you want it to stop smelling, especially when you have a small chamber like this. So this is a way for us to have complete control over what scents are being emanated in the room and how long they are there for, so that we can switch different scents between individual participants and also for the next person to come in. And for the scents that we're working with, I don't want to tell you what the 3 recognizable ones are in case you want to come experience yourself, but we were lucky to work with the Institute of Art and Olfaction. which is great. They're here in LA, in Chinatown. And if you're interested in working with smell and art, I highly recommend checking them out. And then this last smell, the smell like nothing on earth, is designed by Andreas Keller at Rockefeller University. And they actually use this scent for like medical testing, right? If you know this thing of like checking your vision, cover your eye, can you see this letter? It was really hard to do that with smell because there's so much cultural association with scents. People have access or have familiarity with different scents, and it's deeply personal. So this kind of kit of all smells you've never smelled before was a way for them to kind of be able to compare those results. And we have a custom one from them specifically for this experience. So everywhere in the world, you will only smell this in our booth in Silver Lake. But working with smell and working with smell tech is hugely like subjective experience. And that's something that really has taken us by surprise in working with this tech, because we have this scent that's designed to smell like nothing, but people are really trying to figure out, oh, how can I place something on that? And so some of the responses that we've had to describe the exact same odor is chocolate, that if chocolate decayed the way a rose decayed, someone's like, that's what that would smell like. People say it maybe smells like a sheep pasture or a petting zoo. People say it smells like the white rubber of new shoes. And someone even said it smelled like wet bugs. And we really have a 4-page list so far of all the different smells that people have described the same odor as. So yeah, it really surprised us. It's deeply personal. It's really subjective to work with smell, and it's something to lean into and consider in working with scent design. And the other thing that's deeply personal about it is the memories that people will carry with them. There's a responsibility when you work with this type of tech or this type of interface. Some people have had really breathtaking descriptions, like they saw their grandmother's tiles again for the first time while they were in this box. Their lost family member's face came to them, like a long forgotten like summer day at the beach. Things they bring things back. So working with smell is kind of a way to make experiences with technology very personal. These people were just alone in a box with a device, but they still felt connected to each other and connected to other people that they've known. And I would also add that I think this is completely heightened by the contemporary moment. Of course, we've just been on Zoom with no full body engagement. We're also wearing a mask, which like limits our ability to smell our environments. And a lot of people have lost their sense of smell due to COVID. So it's a kind of heightened moment for this. But this project aside, at large, this project has a smaller part. At large, what I'm really interested in is how to use technology to push from seeing art into feeling art. And how can we use new media and also old media, right? Like this extreme darkness, to put like a extreme deprivation of some senses and this hyper focus on some others. And to really push people to experience the world differently from within their own bodies. So I guess when I'm thinking about new media, I don't always want to get rid of the visual, right? I definitely think it's important, but I'm really interested in looking at these multisensory interfaces, both high tech and analog, to think about how we can make connections, right? How we can engage the body and how we can pierce through this oversaturation of the visible, this oversaturation of the audible. And remember that the body is like a whole symphony with multiple senses that are always detecting the world. And how can we really harness this for art? And I think especially, this has always been an important question, the theater background, I know that, but it's especially an important question now, because we're working with new media and we have these new tools and new capacities to really extend our own capabilities. So that's, I think, the end of my 15 minutes, but I would again like to say a huge thank you, and say also, if you're interested in seeing smell print, it's free for a ticket, but you need to sign up for a spot, and it completely sold out, but we wanted people here to be able to see it. So we're going to release new tickets on the A+D website at noon PST tomorrow. So if you're interested, you can check it out there. But I think that's it from me. Huge thank you again, and I'll pass it off to Peter.
Hi, do I just go? Hi, everybody. My name is Peter Wu, and I'm an artist, and I'm the founder, creator, and curator of Epoch. I'll just share my screen real quick. Okay. Epoch is an artist-run virtual experiment launched at the beginning of quarantine. The gallery functions as an inclusive community-building platform with a focus on women, queer, trans, and artists of color. The inability of museums and galleries to adapt to an online world was rendered evident upon the arrival of COVID-19, with many institutions attempting to recreate physical engagement through online viewing. Questions concerning the role of curation, materiality, and the museum itself have been raised. Epoch's unique approach to exhibition building seeks to address these issues by bridging reality with the virtual through critical and compelling presentations. The environment featured throughout our exhibition strives to reflect movements and moments rather than acts of fantasy or escapism. So we have 8 exhibitions to date, and thus far featured over 60 international established and emerging contemporary artists. The gallery seeks to create a new critical context experience art while focusing our mission to react to current social political situations. So you can see here, each environment that we're building is different in each case. So a lot of times I'm kind of sourcing buildings that maybe do actually exist and then taking them to the virtual environment and having artists react to this space. Here are just some few examples of previous exhibitions. This is Fallen Monuments. This is the 3rd exhibition that was created. It's set in these industrial ruins, and it was created in solidarity with the Black Lives Matter movement. This is Phantom Limb, and this opened in October. So this is during the time when the LACMA Amundsen building was being demolished. So I took pictures of that, and what I did was recreate the Amundsen building and then destroyed it, and then put all these artists inside of this show and curated all this and whatnot. And then, so this kind of 3D recreation, it kind of functions as a metaphor for the fragility of art institutions themselves. And it also kind of stages having urgent conversation concerning the role of diversity within such institutions. So most of the artists that are in the show are of Latinx origin. The show before last is called Wonderland, and it is a group exhibition featuring artists of the Chinese diaspora. So the exhibition's context is inspired by Wonderland, which is a theme park that China tried to build much like Disney World, but then they ran out of funding. And so all that remains now is this castle that is basically half built, and then the farmers have retaken over this land. So this exhibition was created in response to the ongoing discrimination and violence towards Asian Americans. Yeah. So with the emergence of NFTs, many of our participating artists look to Epoch to bridge the gap between the crypto and contemporary art worlds. Being primarily artist-centric, the gallery has established itself as a virtual destination that challenges the status quo with critical and innovative approach to curation and exhibition building. So continuing this idea of innovation is how do I was thinking about how to approach an NFT. So what I decided in a certain way was to mint the entire virtual exhibition, which is the current exhibition FREEPORT, as a singular NFT containing compilation of artworks by all the participating artists. So what I didn't want to do was mint individual artists' artworks, which kind of would replicate the kind of glut that I was seeing happening on these other marketplaces. So I thought this was an interesting solution, which has not been done before. And what also had not been done before was the smart contract that I implemented, which is built upon an equitable, sustainable, and ecological model. So a little bit about this exhibition, FREEPORT, is it's modeled and inspired by the actual Luxembourg Freeport, which you can Google online. And you can, they had the blueprints and elevations online, so I basically modeled to spec. So when you're traveling through the show, and I'll give you a little example after, we'll go through the exhibition a little bit, and you can kind of see that you're actually going through the building. So, oh yeah, sorry, let's go back here. So in talking about the show, what I want to do is bring the bridge the similarities between free ports and NFTs. So both of these exist in unregulated territories. They're both constructs of capitalism, and they both can elicit unsavory practices such as tax evasion and fraud. So with a touch of irony, what I'm trying to do is circumvent these similarities by offering a holistic approach to an NFT built upon an ecological, equitable, and sustainable model. So ecological, so Epoch is working with Untitled.art, which is based out of France, to mint its NFT on Algorand, which is the only pure proof of stake protocol, and it's 99% less impactful on our environment than blockchains such as Ethereum. So it's a POS blockchain rather than a POW blockchain, which is what Ethereum is, and you've probably seen it in the news. It's quite environmentally damaging and whatnot. So this is one of the reasons why we chose Algorand. So through Algorand smart contract, we are able to split the profits between the participating artists and Epoch. So 70% is split between all the participating artists and 30% remains with the gallery. There's also 20% royalty set in with the secondary market, and all the artists get an AP edition of the actual exhibition. So this is an equitable contract that hasn't been established, because when you usually mint something on Ethereum or whatever, there can only be one owner of the certain NFT. So essentially, the contract, that smart contract, has all the artists' wallets in there, and then when a sale has been made, it directly goes into their wallets, and it kind of respects these kinds of boundaries and stuff like that. So sustainable. I hope that this equitable model will support the production of future exhibitions and practice of all the participating artists. And Epoch has forgo an auction format in hopes to circumvent the accelerated speculation of the current market. This model is also socially sustainable, paving the way for communities of artists to recognize that we don't have to be bound to the structures of traditional gallery systems. So all this stuff that I've done on smart contracts and whatnot. So I didn't go onto a marketplace so that you can actually acquire the work, the editions, and there's edition of 5 directly from the site. So this is all open source. So any artist or gallery that wants to do this can potentially kind of contact me, and I can help you kind of do it if you want. So right now, let me just go through real quick and show you the actual exhibition. Okay, so this is epoch.gallery, and this is the current show, which features Neil Balufa, Sarah Rosalina Brady, Alice Bucknell, Juan Crivelli, Alexandra Komentiki, and Amanda Ross Ho, and Harad Saab. And there's 2 artists, Sarah and Amanda are from Los Angeles, and the rest are international. So within the first beginning of programming and building these shows, I was mainly focused on Los Angeles area artists because I knew a lot of them. So it was easier to kind of procure, but then, and I get them to join. And then now I'm trying to bridge out more into more international and different kind of cities around the world and stuff like that. So you can just click on the screen here, and then you can kind of go here and enter the exhibition. So this is in full VR. This is, you can actually, you can see this on your mobile or laptop, so that, and that's one really important factor that I really wanted to do, because I wanted anybody to be able to access the show, no matter of really kind of your economic status or kind of where you are in the world, instead of downloading an app or whatnot. So you can kind of go through the exhibition. This piece here is by Neil Balufa. I don't know if you can hear that or not. Okay. So these are these paintings that they actually created from previous works he's done, and he's animated them. And they're kind of talking about their new kind of designation as NFTs and paintings within these FREEPORT, and this piece called the FREEPORT song, and they eventually sing and whatnot. Also, you can click this map here, which you can kind of jump around to different areas, and my face is actually blocking the surface. So I'm gonna have to go out. So you can go through. Here's a piece by Amanda Rossho here and here. And we'll just go through here. So these are 3D objects that she just found online, because Amanda Rossho, she really works with found objects in real life. So it kind of really didn't make sense for her to kind of find these masks online. So all of the works that she's done here are all masks. Sorry, this is weird here. Okay. This is a carnival mask. And so she just did a simple gesture of flipping them kind of upside down so that the face is facing the bottom here. And yeah, it's creating a very kind of disjointing kind of feeling. And this is one of the main works that she's done, which is these kind of funny goggles that you see. I don't know. Okay, then we can go here. And this is Juan Covelli's installation. So here you can kind of see a video of the piece. And so Juan had this great idea to try to build a whole installation. So he took many of the images and models from this video, and then we created an installation together and placed many of his artworks in here. So now you can go up to the FREEPORT. So this is the lobby of the FREEPORT. And so this is to spec. So what you're seeing here is actually the FREEPORT. And so FREEPORTs, if anybody doesn't really know, are places where the extreme wealthy hide their artworks, and you can't get taxed on them because they're kind of these kind of unregulated territories. And this piece here, I'll kind of skip over here. But that was Alice Bucknell's work here. And Alice Bucknell did this really great, interesting video where she is creating this hypothetical luxury kind of complex in the Florida Everglades, which really you can't really build anything upon. And so she's trying to, in a certain way, pitch it and sell it to these rich people in this video. And so it's kind of a speculative fiction and a take on our environmental damage and that there's everything that's going on. So here's the actual lobby, and here is a mural by Juan Covelli too. And then we can go through here, and this is a piece by Harad Saab, and he's based in Columbus at the current moment. So quick tidbit here. So these are actually kind of what you would see in an actual FREEPORT, where there's these sliding kind of things going out, and you can see the artworks, but obviously you can see all the artworks are blank. But a good little tidbit is that the material for the back of these are textured and named cardboard, so that these are actually not even real artworks. Obviously, they're not even placeholders in a certain way. They're just facades. So he's kind of commenting on all that kind of situation. Then we can go through here, and this is the rest of Alice Bucknell's installation, Swamp City. So these are the actual airboats in her video, and we created this great little neon sign to kind of place in the middle. And you can all kind of see this yourselves and whatnot, but you can enter here and you can see the full video. So the outside, the thing on the alligator was a 30-minute promo, and this is the 40-minute video, which you can see. Also, if you go here, there's all these little surprises where you can click this PDF here, and she's written, so Alice is also very prolific in writing, and she has written many texts about the problematics of NFTs and the ecological damage, and why she kind of chose to participate in this exhibition. So she wanted to include a PDF in this exhibition, which is in there. Also, this model here is the actual model that she used for the Forest Everglade piece that she did in the video. So we created this kind of mini model, and you can actually go in and kind of explore the model itself and kind of get a sense of a different world, micro and the macro and the to micro kind of situation going on. So I'm going to kind of push this button here and kind of jump quickly to the the second floor here. And this is Sarah Rosalina Brady's work. And what she did was took 50,000 letter forms from around the world, and she put it into machine learning, and it kind of churned out and created these new kind of senses of letters, which are kind of alien or kind of otherworldly, but there's still like a connotation that they are symbols of the sort. So she's kind of playing with those kinds of ideas. And she also works in craft, and she kind of uses machine learning in craft. So it's a really interesting juncture that she's trying to bridge together. Then we can go kind of upstairs, and then you can see the final piece of the show, which is Alexandra's work. And this is actually, and all the exhibition, you have these little kind of title cards, you can read about it. So what she did was did a site-specific installation in Greece, where we then took a lot of photographs of the piece, which is called photogrammetry, and then we entered into the computer program. So you can take 2D images, many 2D images, and then change them into a 3D model. And so that's what happened here, is that we kind of took that piece and then kind of interjected and placed it into this environment. And yeah, so I don't know if that's my time. That might be my time, might be a little early. But yeah, this is just basically what I'm doing. And let me get out of here for a second. And you can see all the exhibitions online here. So every single one is available in VR. And if you have, I made these, I don't know if you can see it, but like these VR goggles. So if you had these Google VR cardboard goggles, which you can actually get on the internet for pretty cheap, you can kind of see each one on your mobile phone in full VR. So it's working with the gyroscope of your phone, and you can kind of orient it yourself and kind of be exploring it and whatnot. And then here is just the NFT thing, which you can acquire. So what is offered is an 8K virtual exhibition. So you're actually getting a higher resolution of what you just witnessed of this exhibition, containing all the artist's artwork. And this is viewable on actual VR headsets, not just the Google Cardboard situation. And it's an Algorand and whatnot. So this also states what it's about. So that's pretty much the quick and dirty about what I do. And I think if there's any questions, I can go ahead and answer that too.
Great. Thank you, Peter. As Peter said, we're going to be moving on to our Q&A portion as well. I'm going to send the smell print link in the chat. If anyone would like to go see, to go take a tour of Epoch or look at anybody's work, we've dropped all the links in the chat. Actually, the first question that has been there a couple times, I think it's probably been in the chat a lot, is if Peter, if you could explain what an NFT is to our audience.
Okay, it's a long conversation. It's sort of, I'll try to do a very quick summary. So NFT is essentially a deed, or it's something that it proves provenance or authenticity for a digital artwork, so that you can, it ties to it either an actual artwork that's digital, but essentially it's just like a deed to your house. It's not saying that necessarily that you own your house necessarily, but the deed, because maybe the bank owns your house for a mortgage or whatever not, but it's basically stating that you have the rights and there's a deed to your house. Now, yeah, NFTs are a kind of the new way, not just for digital artworks, but they are going to pervade every single aspect of your life in the near future. So whether that means concert tickets or even, you know, different things, it's going to be in every single aspect of your life. So, and whether or not you really need to know what they are, because they're basically, all these companies are going to be doing it. And it's probably going to be so seamless in a way that the word NFT in itself, the non-fungible token, will just be nothing. It will be just be so integrated in your life that you won't even have to really think about it anymore in a certain way. But it all's based around this idea of blockchain and decentralization. So, and the idea is decentralization, there's not a central bank that kind of is running things or a central entity. It's a kind of a new way to kind of interact with each other, with communities, and building new, and if you want to think about it, you can build new ecological systems which I have kind of tried to implement, and that really haven't been really experimented, because usually we're kind of forced into the system that is created for us, you know? So these are opportunities and ways of thinking about how to expand different kinds of ecologies and economic kind of systems and whatnot. So yeah, I don't know if that really helped. Like maybe a little bit, but
I think it helped, at least me, with all my knowledge of NFTs. A follow-up to that, you mentioned a lot making it equitable and ecological. How exactly do NFTs affect the environment, as you mentioned?
yeah, so on Ethereum, so there's two types of blockchains. So this is a lot of knowledge that everybody's going into, and I don't want to make it all about an NFT talk, because there's been many of that on Clubhouse. If you want to go on Clubhouse, you can kind of check all these stuff out. If you want to do some research, it's all there. But just on the general scope, there's two different blockchains: the proof of work, which is what Bitcoin and Ethereum are, and then there's proof of stake, which is the one Algorand that I'm using, Tezos. Is another proof of stake. So proof of work requires miners, which are solving complex mathematical problems to create these blocks in the chain. So it needs to solve a problem, and it requires a lot of computing power to do that. So that is costing a lot of energy. So the energy consumption is really quite high. I think it's something like, to mint one work, it's on a super rare or foundation, it costs like 3 days worth of household energy. Whereas as a proof of stake doesn't require miners. It's just the word is basically stake. You stake into it. So you put your crypto into it, and then eventually it kind of works its way in. It doesn't require miners. So it's not solving any complex problems. So it's 99.9% less impactful on the environment. And even Algorand itself is trying to claim carbon neutral, which is trying to doing offsets. I don't know myself if I'm really on board with offsetting, what that really kind of means, like, you know, planting trees and stuff like that to kind of offset your carbon footprint. I don't know if that's BS, but, you know, it's a nice attempt.
All right. And then this is on a very different note. We received a question. Devin, what's your favorite smell?
Believe it or not, I've never had that question. I don't know if I have I think ones that I like think about being evocative are like asphalt after the first rain is always like a big one. There's also like classrooms when the days are like warm again, right? Like when the weather changes, that has a very specific smell. But if we were gonna ask like bottled smell, quite floral. I like gardenia, jasmine, lavender, which actually can tell you a lot about somebody's personality. So I'm careful to release that.
I like the smell of my partner.
There's one that probably a lot of people can agree with. Great. Another question we've had come up is, so both of your works deal a lot with accessibility and diversity, both of the artwork itself and your audiences. After what we've just been through for the past year and a half and are still going through, how have you seen the momentum to create art forms that are more accessible and more diverse? Have you seen a change in momentum as we are starting to maybe possibly bridge out of this pandemic era? I can start with Devin, maybe.
Sure, I can go because I think mine is very obvious. I mean, particularly in terms of thinking about smell and smell tech. When I started this project in 2019, we were like, okay, like what is a time that you would want to like Skype somebody that you've never met before and not meet them in person? And we were like trying to imagine like maybe a job interview or like a first date, would that happen? Like trying to imagine kind of a use case for the research we were doing. And then the whole world moved onto Zoom. So one big takeaway from that has been like how to think about interfaces that don't just rely on ability to see and an ability to hear and things like that, and what are like other ways to kind of form connection and also like convey information. So that's one part of it. And then, but then the other part of it is that a lot of people lost their sense of smell in the last year. And that is something a lot of times like a kind of major issue with anosmia is people will go in and their doctors won't even know about losing your sense of smell. Like they'll have found out more on Google than their doctors will know, because it's something that's not really considered. And something that really blew my mind and haunted me with the research I was doing is it was a study that followed two groups, one that lost their vision suddenly and one that lost their sense of smell suddenly. And the group that lost their sense of smell suffered a lot more emotional distress in the long run. Yeah, and I won't go into that more, but I can talk more about it with anyone who has questions. But I think there's like pushing into this type of work and reminding people of the importance of it is like offering a new modality for people who rely on their sense of smell and don't have a lot of devices that work with it. But then on the flip side, also like bringing in awareness for people who have lost it. It's a double-pronged answer, but I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, so just on my side, I mean, wow, where do we start? I mean, with COVID and everything that happened, there was a lot of fractures that you started seeing amongst galleries, institutions, and yes, galleries, institutions are very important to the art world ecosystem, and I don't think they're going to go away necessarily. But you started seeing kind of the faults of what's starting to happen with the representation of people of color, artists of color, and you know, it was becoming very apparent that we were not served correctly, and that that certain people were placed in certain positions where maybe they shouldn't have been, and that they were fighting for certain things that they shouldn't be. And there's a stubbornness that goes on from the top end, because you know they're usually, you know, who's usually ruling these kinds of things are white male curators and you know whatnot. So it's kind of a top down. So how to, and then there was a lot of change in trying to, the institutions, they're trying to change all this stuff, and we saw a lot of people kind of resigning and stuff like that. Whether I think that there's change actually happening, that is still yet to be seen, whether these things are actually making a difference or whatnot. But it's the good fight that I'm trying to do necessarily, and try to show these people that haven't been really represented in a certain light. And this whole idea, even just as a gallery being a white wall, and when did white walls become neutral? That's something that I always kind of gave me some icky feelings. So I always wanted to kind of have an exhibition space where the context of it can change, so that you can kind of respond to things differently. And yeah, so I mean, this is it's a tough subject, because there's a lot of things that need still to be happened, and I don't think galleries are responding correctly, because I think a lot of it is tied to their identity to their physical space, because their identity to their physical space creates their money for them. Usually they have to create a nice white space to kind of create the monetary thing. So when virtuality came about, they didn't know how to go beyond that space. So it was tied too much to their identity, I think. So and that's why they couldn't, and that's why when they try to do virtual exhibitions using maybe Matterport, where they scan their space, it just kind of looks sad and as a tool. And that's something that we don't really want to experience, especially a reminder that the thing that we can't go to, like it wasn't any imagination going on. And I think artists are much more adept to being able to kind of explore different ways of presenting work, which I think what I've tried to put forth, and working with artists and you know, even when you don't have work that is necessarily tied to physics or monetary restrictions or even scale, it really kind of expands what an artist is thinking about their own work and how you can work within virtuality. And I don't think necessarily that especially the things I'm doing is going to be going anywhere. If not, I think there's going to be more importance tied to it, and either the space of the gallery, the dinosaur space, is going to have to catch up, or they're going to be left in the dust, especially even with an ecological, economical system like NFTs, where a gallery is putting 50-50 and I'm introducing something that's 70-30 or different kind of economic systems that can be in place. They have to recognize that the old way of working is no longer, they're going to have to adapt, or they're not going to be able to. And I think there's a lot of, they're struggling to try to figure that out. Sotheby's is trying to get into it. There's art fairs that are trying to get into it, but there's a lot of difficulty in how to proceed because they just don't know how to break their system, because they never had to. They never had to think outside of that in a certain way, and because that's what supported it, you know. So, I mean, one last note is that a lot of starting emerging galleries start up, and usually, you know, they have really great aspirations of trying to change the system or trying to change the world, but eventually they get stuck into the system because now they have overhead, they have rent, they have to deal with the same collectors, and it eventually becomes that they just get sucked into the system. They became a cookie cutter just like everybody else, and this is why a lot of galleries I think feel at the end of, well, you know, certain things that they feel like, you know, jaded and whatnot, or they're not who the goals they set out to be is not what they wanted to do. And so, I mean, being a virtual gala, I don't have any of those restrictions a certain way, and I don't really have to, do any of that. And I'm pretty free in what I can do and how I can operate, and I don't have to really be accountable for anybody in a certain way, as into collectors in that kind of system. I'm accountable for artists and with their word and stuff like that. But other than that, so sorry that went a little long.
It's all right. Thank you for the very, very thoughtful answer. A very related question we have that popped up is about virtual art networks, exhibitions, and access to devices being an equivalent to the exclusivity, being a new equivalent to the exclusivity to traditional museum experiences. So I guess what this person is trying to ask is, could it be said, how do we make the privilege of technology more accessible compared to the traditional museum experience?
Well, one that's just really quickly. I used to teach system impacted youth with this organization called Artworks LA, and a lot of these kids didn't have laptops, but they did have cell phones. So what I always want to do is make sure that these kids could see what I was doing and they could experience it, so that I had to make sure that everything that I was doing worked on cell phones with anybody that had internet access. It could work on laptops and whatever not. That if you had the VR thing, you don't need it. You can just still use your phone and the gyroscope. So that accessibility is really important to me in a certain way, whether someone doesn't have a cell phone in itself, but I think many people do. We're talking in most of the developed world. So, but yeah, I mean, Devin, if you want to take over that part after that.
In terms of making technology accessible, I mean, I think you know, part of the interfaces that I'm working with are definitely not at home. You'll have this device, you'll plug it into your computer. So it's much more about generating free public spaces. And this project in particular is free for the public to attend. And as part of the development process, I was really, really proud to partner with Stanford's STEM to STEM program. And I had 6 students, 6 young women working in STEM and art from across America to work with me on the tools and the research and to really dive in. And their work is actually presented in the gallery, which you can see. And I think this program is great because they actually even give funding to people who would otherwise not be able to participate in the internship. So there's actually like a stipend for people to develop this work. And it's particularly for high school students and community college students. So that's kind of how I try to go about it, because nobody will have a smell machine with the smells I have loaded up at home, right? But how can we have free public spaces, and how can we have educational opportunities?
Great, thank you both. Another question we've had come up is, Devin, you talked a lot about all of the lower senses, and we've heard about you speak on your research on smell. Do you see any research happening on touch or how that becomes accessible at home? Any your thoughts on the sense of touch in new media?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the same thing that these devices right now are very much like they do one specific thing. So it's at large, the things I'm working with are not things that will be at home. If there's, of course, like vibrations, haptics, things we've discussed. And people use that like haptic vibrations with music and things like that. But there are a lot, but since they do one specific thing, you can come to a specific place and try it for free. But in terms of what these technologies can do, there's awesome things like I mean, I've worked a lot with just like kind of subwoofers that are on backpacks, so you have this like kind of low level vibrations trembling through you and things like that. That's from a company called Subpack. But there's also, I'm working now with the lab at UC Santa Barbara, the Perceptual Engineering Lab, and they're working on like just really cool things where you can kind of feel somebody gripping your arm from around the world, right, from the other side of the world, and what are these kind of prototype technologies that are being created, and how can we make them with art projects?
Great, thank you. I think we have time for one more question. So last question, Peter already touched on it a bit, but even the title of this program says emerging in it, and says, and we talk a lot about this being a new wave of artistic experience. At what point do either of you see this new wave becoming the norm, as well as are there any other challenges that you see this contemporary world of art giving you in the sense that it is still very involved with art history? We can start with either one of you.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think, I mean, even where we're experiencing, you know, another variant, the Delta variant and the Lambda variant coming in, I think, you know, people are freaking out again that things are going to be closing, and things have been. I've been getting notifications that some shows have been closing, some. And so I think it's something that's the new reality in a certain way that you have to kind of figure out how to deal with. And being virtual and having, say, a metaverse or whatnot can it's going to be something that is going to be coming up and being the norm of how you experience other people and life and whatnot. So I do recommend people going outside and taking a deep breath and experiencing nature and stuff like that. But these are things that are entwined, and I don't think there's really any way of going back now. And if people can do interesting shows and new experiences, then you know, then it's up to others to catch up in a certain way, like the galleries or institutions, what they're trying to figure out how to do, you know, and honestly they are. But I think we're getting to a place where these things have a longevity to it, and especially with the emergence of NFTs, that this is not going anywhere for sure. So this is something that's going to be ingrained in everything that you do and how you experience the world. So.
I think right now there's like immersive has become this really big buzzword, right? Everyone wants to go see immersive content. But also coming from a theater background, we know like we've had this for a long time, right? Like and considering like the full body experience has been something that as long as we've had stages and as long as we've had theaters and as long as we've had orators, it's been considered. So in that sense, I think it's like kind of using new tools to follow a much longer lineage. But then I think it's also really important to address like the concerns of the moment. And smelling in particular is something I'm thinking about a lot, because there's this obvious thing in the middle of our face that we don't think about very often, right? Like, and it also comes inlaid with so many like social cultural implications. All smell preferences are taught to you. We identify different people like we identify like safety basically and identity through the act of smelling, and it's something that is a highly manipulative force as well, right? Like it's something we can be excited and explore, but we have to recognize the serious consequences of it. So I really think like this is using this smell tech and using art in this way as part of this larger project of olfactory studies that is looking to decolonize the nose. I think that's kind of how I see these works doing that.
And maybe just the last note is that with any certain technology in the history of technology, but I'm optimistic, but also pessimistic in a certain way at the same time. And a lot of the technologies that you see that's happened, that it took a leap in civilization, it usually always had good intentions, but it ended up being detrimental to kind of the world in a certain way, whether that be the A-bomb or social media or drones or whatever not, or certain medical advancements, cloning. So I think we have to be a lot as artists and as people thinking about how we can ethically do things and how to proceed with caution, and thinking about, you know, the ramifications of certain things, whether that be through AI or whatever not, you know, and kind of thinking about how to not just proceed with caution, but how do we do it so that it can actually benefit us and everybody, you know. So yeah.
Okay, well, thank you. I see we ran out of time. Sorry if we didn't get to your question, but just feel free to go to Devin. I'm sorry. Feel free to check out Devin and Peter's work. Thank you to Devin and Peter for being here and like exhibiting and showing your work and just speaking. You guys are just a great inspiration. Be sure to check out Smell Print if you're lucky enough to get tickets. And you can take a closer look at Peter's epoch and his other works by going to his website and searching under projects. Thanks to the audience for joining us this evening. We hope to see you at the Armory. Our registration to see our current exhibition, Allison's Star, Ether and Earth, is open on our website. We would like to thank our Armory colleagues for attending and supporting us this evening. Thank you again for joining, and have a good night.